Today, we visit with Dan Pope, candidate for mayor here in studio. Dan, welcome back to the show.
It's great to be here, Chad. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It was a weekend that was predicted to have a lot of rain, but it turned into a very nice weekend, which meant, I'm sure, you and your campaign were able to get out there and do a little block walking and visit with more people.
That's right. It was great. The prediction of our demise was greatly exaggerated. It was we had a great day Saturday, and yesterday got to make a couple of events yesterday, a meet and greet with some folks, and went by the Friends of Library event yesterday, their annual meeting, and so knocked on a few doors. Just a busy weekend.
Yeah.
Very, very good weekend.
What are the topics that when you're knocking on people's doors, what are they talking to you about?
They want to talk about common sense kind of things, Chad. Our message seems to be making sense. They don't understand why we can't live within our budget. They want to understand about our debt. Once you explain our debt to them, I'm not saying it's all correct, Chad, but once you explain that 70% of our debt is related to water, electricity, and stormwater, they start to understand it. Then they want to ask how long that debt, how long those bonds last, how long we'll be paying that debt.
Right.
They want to talk about that. They want to talk about. It's amazing how many people want to talk about downtown. It's remarkable how many people talk about how proud they are of our police and fire. They love their neighborhoods, and they really, when you talk to people, on their front doorstep, they're very interested in the things closest to them, and it's that neighborhood, and either they're very positive about it, or there may be that one house that's the people told it's an absentee landlord, they don't take care of business, something like that. But those are generally the things people want to talk about.
Well, with downtown, this has been an issue in the forums that have popped up with you. And I want you to explain, because in some of these forums that are out there, and I think the forums are good, but you just don't always have the time to really explain details and get it to the meat of the issue. So I want to do that because one of your opponents has been on Facebook, and it seems like that's where he's been doing most of his campaigning, is on Facebook, and raises questions about an investment group that you've been a part of. One of your other opponents has brought that up in past forums. He was here on the show and saying that you can't be trusted because you didn't divulge all the details in that, and how could we trust you in the future? So I want you to get into this investment group, what it is, and I know in a past forum you said that you would divest from that if elected. So go ahead and go into that, please.
Okay, so thanks. I'm glad we get to talk about this. First and foremost, my wife and I have owned property in downtown Lubbock since 1996. We operated our business down there. We continue to own that property. It's not a buy and flip kind of deal for us. It's a long-term investment. It's a big part of our retirement. And we've improved that. We've added on and improved that space since we've been there. I am part of a private group. Actually started the idea, I would give credit to Mayor Robertson for. He assembled a group of business people maybe 3 years ago and said, listen, I think if we're ever going to get downtown to tip, it's going to really happen with private investment. And I would like to think that we could raise some money, that we would be able to make investments to try to incent other people to join us, either local or outside investors to join us and try to maybe accelerate the downtown redevelopment. So that effort, there is a number. I don't know how many are involved. There are a number of local people that invested, and we raised between $1.5 million and $2 million. It's got a board of directors. I did serve on that board for a period of time. When I decided to run for mayor, I stood down. I felt like it was appropriate that I would do that. And if I'm elected, I'll divest myself of what's not a huge investment, but I'll divest myself of that. And I would hope that I would be able to get my money back. I'm not going to back down from the fact that I've invested downtown. It's something I've talked about since the day I announced my candidacy. I'm not hiding anything. I'm a capitalist. I believe that the downtown needs to be redeveloped by the private sector. I've said that all along.
Right.
In this case, I think it's just putting our money where our mouth is.
There have been some who have said that you have served in capacities as well that have brought up ideas as part of the organization. I believe it may be the Downtown TIF Board or one of the organizations. that has put forward ideas for downtown, the monorail, bike lanes, whatever it may be, and that you were part of the group, not necessarily that you yourself promoted the ideas, but you were with the group that did promote these ideas. Are those ideas that you would embrace if you elected mayor, with taxpayer money going even more into downtown?
Yeah, so I think I am on the Downtown TIF board. I've been on that board for 3 or 4 years, 5 years maybe, appointed by the council to serve on that. We get a lot of ideas that come through there. It's citizen-driven, staff-driven, business-driven ideas that come. Some have more merit than others. I'm not supportive of the monorail. I think it's it's someday if we could find a way to connect tech and downtown in a more reasonable kind of way with public transportation, then maybe we need to look at it. But we need to have people living downtown before that makes sense. It just doesn't. Yeah. You don't want to get way out in front of something like that. We don't want to be You
don't want an empty monorail going from downtown.
And the monorail. Anyway, I just think that's something we need to put behind us. The bike pass were recently talked about. I think that's something that's going to happen. It's we've talked a lot about how we connect both north and south and east and west with bike pass. That's frankly for us, it's a minor investment at the city. It's really just doing some striping. It's 90 cents out of every dollar is our tax dollars coming back to us from both Washington and Austin. Whether we like it or not, we do pay those taxes. We need to get our share back, and that's something that we've really not done a great job of doing. And I do think that connecting the campus, the tech campus, to the Canyon Lakes makes sense. I think the plan that they laid out makes a lot of sense, and I'm going to be supportive of that. I don't think it's a bad investment. The city's portion of it is very, very minor. That's not our decision at the TIF board. I think that's most important. Is that's a council decision, and the council will weigh in on that, whether it be this council or the next council. But we do need to make decisions that'll move our community forward, and if we're going to be attractive to young people and try to grow our private sector job base, we've got to embrace things like Uber and like the Uncorked Wine Festival that the Chamber did this weekend, or the Arts Festival, which was this weekend. People want to be outside enjoying our community. If it happens to be downtown, that's great. I was around all over the city on Saturday and Sunday, and people were in parks, and people were, people just were enjoying. We have great weather, and we often are given a hard time about this climate we live in, and I wouldn't trade it. There are 15 or 20 days a year that aren't great. Outside of that, it's a great place to live, and I'm glad to be able to talk about that.
With downtown and the issue of private-public partnerships, those always come up. Yeah. I think there's a hotel that's being planned. It's a public-private partnership. Where do you draw the line as far as government getting involved in public-private partnerships? Let's say with downtown redevelopment, let's say if there's a privately funded venture that goes on downtown, but they're not able to make it. They need extra funding, like this hotel. Yeah. At what point then does the city kick in millions of dollars? I think with this downtown hotel, they're looking at $22 million.
I don't know that. I mean, I saw the presentation. I think you're aware they were asked to go back and work on their numbers a little bit on that to try to find more private investment. The city doesn't need to be propping up a private investment. Okay,
right.
I just think there's a role the city plays. I mean, there's a piece of property downtown today that one of my opponents has given me a hard time about, because that downtown development group has it under contract, a potential $50 to $75 million investment right on Broadway downtown, that the city has about $1 million worth of infrastructure, utility work that they're planning on replacing. It's not like this new stuff. We're talking about clay tile pipe, sewer pipe that they're planning on replacing. The developer couldn't replace themselves anyway. And there's been some effort to get the city to maybe prioritize that. I think in that regard, I think that's the city's role. It's the infrastructure, it's the utility piece of that. But the city, with other people's money, with tax dollars, does not need to be propping up private investment. Private investors don't want that.
Some do. Well, the hotel, it seems they want some public money.
There's a model at the Overton. The Overton, they did a conference center and they did some different kind of things there. And there was some public, private, and frankly, what I would call public, private, and nonprofit. The local foundations came in and chipped in there. That model has worked very well. The return on that's been great. The city doesn't need to take that high of a profile of a position in those kind of investments. Now, I will say that if you want to dedicate the hotel motel tax from a certain specific venue or look to back into that project, I would look at something like that. That's not dollars that are coming from property tax. That's from the people who are staying there. And I frankly think that's a good way to potentially invest in that deal.
Visiting with Dan Pope, candidate for mayor. When we come back, we've got a lot more to get into, including annexation and, really a lot else that is going on with the city of Lubbock. We'll be right back. Dan Pope in studio, candidate for mayor.
Great to be here.
Yeah.
Great to be here, yeah.
Thank you for coming in. Early voting a week away. And for this race, really for all city council races, and I've been talking about this for a week or two now, it just seems like there are a lot of people who are disengaged in the local election, that maybe the national has just beat people down so much that they're just disengaged in this. So how do you motivate people? How do you get people out there to go and vote? And are you seeing a fatigue factor out there or a disengaged factor among voters or among people when you knock on the door?
I don't think we're to the point of fatigue yet, but I do think there's some disengagement. I think there's also confusion. The fact that we have a congressional runoff, a very prominent congressional runoff later in May, I think that's got people confused. I mean, the most popular question is, why can't we vote all at the same time?
Yeah.
I mean, which it's a good question, I think. But, what we're trying to do is just drive the importance of people being part of the process. We want people to vote. We'd love to have them vote for us, but we want people to vote. The most people that have ever voted for mayor was in Miller Martin won in 2006. And I think about 26,500 people voted.
Yeah.
Now, we have roughly 140,000 people in the city that are registered to vote, plus or minus a few.
Yeah.
That's a travesty. I mean, we need to have more people part of the process. And it's not like tremendously more people vote for in the presidential election.
Sure.
It's just, I think we turned out 27.5% of the registered Republicans voted. I can't remember what the number was on the Democratic side, but
yeah.
I think less than a third of our voters voted, or right at a third, and that was maybe the highest turnout in big cities in the state. Our people do vote. We want to get them engaged. We'll spend a lot of time and effort, including some TV and radio, encouraging people to go vote. I mean, you can start next Monday and vote at virtually any United supermarkets except 50th in Indiana starting next Monday through the weekend, through the middle of the next week, take a few days off, and then election days on the 7th, more at our super precinct type of way of voting. But we're going to really encourage people to vote.
How do you separate yourself from the rest of the field? There are some who say this is a race between you and one of your other opponents who used to serve on the city council. That this, that's the main race. That's how many view the race. And as of right now, I see it that way as well. So how do you distinguish yourself from your opponents? What is the big difference?
Well, I think, first of all, it's my leadership ability. I've served in both private sector and public sector kind of leadership roles. And I'm not talking about being on the team. My wife and I started and built a small business and created 70 jobs. I did that for 20 years. I ran the United Way campaign in 2005. I spent 8 years on the board of Covenant Health, including a year as board chair. I've spent 9 years on the Lubbock School Board, including the last 2 as the board president. I've got the ability to move people in the same direction, okay? I'm not going to sit here and say I'm a consensus builder. I think that's a little trite. But I do think you've got to get going the same direction. And I think that's one of the challenges we've had. I think that's probably the biggest advantage that I have. I think my business experience gives me something that none of my opponents have. And I think that you learn a lot of lessons out there, good and bad. You get your nose bloodied. You have the scars to show for it, but at the same time, you learn to be resilient. You learn to say no, Chad. We got to learn to say no at City Hall a little bit more. Not every idea is a good idea.
Right. You know, I watched the forum that was over at LISD, and Lubbock Online had it as well, or the Lubbock Avalanche Journal. And one of the parts that stood out for me, and I you can maybe point to business experience on this one, was when the issue of tornado sirens came up. And everyone on stage said that they were for tornado sirens. Some said we needed to have a bond election, and I think you were one of those who said, "Yeah, I'm for a bond." And then you took a 30-second. And you went, "Wait a minute! If it's only going to cost $2 million, we can find a place in the budget for that." Are those the issues that you think, when it comes to budget issues, where we don't have to form a committee every single time? We don't have to do. We can actually find things in the budget to cut. And is that something where you think your skills come into play?
I do. I definitely do. We have a roughly $750 million budget. If in fact tornado sirens are going to cost $2 million, that's less than 1/3 of 1% of the budget. I mean, come on. You prioritize what's important, and that's what you fund.
Are tornado sirens important in your mind?
I think they are. Yeah, I think they may be. There may be a new age version. I mean, I grew up in Central Texas, well out of Tornado Alley, but we had, we knew that on the third Saturday of every month at 10 a.m. we tested our sirens. You probably had similar in Grand Prairie growing up there. It's if it's that investment, if it is just $2 million. I think it's something we should do. I do think there's other ways to get the word out. I mean, I think we need to look for ways to do it through an app that we might, get it to people's phones. But not everybody has a phone. There's people like my folks that, they don't travel everywhere with their phone. So if we can do it for $2 million, yeah, I think it's something we should do.
Annexation. You probably saw the news about City Council. They approved the annexation plan. If you would have been on the council, and knowing what you know right now about this annexation plan of allowing the 20-year, grace period, how would you have voted if you were on the City Council?
I don't know all the details of the situation, but I find I find it potentially not really not great public policy to cut out to cut this deal for that. I mean, we've got 240-something thousand citizens. I think at some point the greater good went out. I mean, now you realize that we need to do a better job with annexation and telling our story. We need to let citizens know where we're coming, where we're going to, what our role is, how we're going to, where we're going to stop. I talked to a business owner on Tohoku Highway the other day that was.
Can you hang out one more segment?
Sure.
All right. We'll be right back with Dan Pope. We get to carry him over one more segment. Why? Because I asked a in-depth question with 30 seconds left, and Dan Pope didn't get full time to get into the issue of annexation. For those who didn't hear, Dan, we were talking about annexation, and the City Council voted this past week, and I think there were only 2 votes that went against this. And there's going to be a second reading on it. But my question to you was, if you were on the council at the time of this reading, there's I believe a 20-year opt-out clause where people can have a 20-year grace period in this annexation, and it's mainly South Lubbock, this huge piece of area for South Lubbock. How would you have voted? What would you have done at City Hall? Of course, you weren't in every single meeting, but knowing what you know, what is the future of annexation? How do you look at this whole situation?
Yeah, so let me see if I can better explain it this time. First of all, I think we owe property owners a plan. We need to let them know where the city is coming. And if we're going to annex their area, we need to let them know that. And they should know that it's our intent to do that well in advance of us doing it. We've asked a group of citizens to work with staff and elected officials to come up with an annexation plan that it seems to me makes a lot of sense, and I would like to see us implement that. We owe people answers, though, business owners and homeowners. I think the specific issue you asked me about, I'm concerned that we may end up, or we're going to end up, it looks like, with an unincorporated piece of our city surrounded by the city of Lubbock. And then even inside that unincorporated piece, I guess you could opt in or opt out. And I don't know how that works, Chad. I mean, if you and I are neighbors and I opt out and you opt in, does that mean the street in front of my house doesn't get maintained, but it does in front of yours?
Right.
What happens when there's when neither one of us mows our yard? Do they come make you mow yours, but they don't make me mow mine because they're enforcing the codes? I just think it's problematic. And let's have a plan. The state law really clearly defines annexation, and it's property right. It's property owner friendly. I do think that we should let people know what our plans are and give them some advance on that. We're coming. This is where we're going to go. We think for the next 10 years, this is our plan.
Can the city of Lubbock realistically look 20, 30, 40 years into the future? You may have a homeowner right now who, let's say they're in their upper 30s. They don't want to live in the city of Lubbock anymore. They want to move far away from the city of Lubbock. They don't want to deal with LP&L. They don't want to deal with any of those issues. And they move however far away they can get, still be reasonably close to Lubbock, though. Can we, as a city, can we reasonably tell them, hey, in 40 years, we're not going to come and annex your land?
I don't think you can go 40 years out. I mean, 5 to 10 probably is about as far as you can go with something like this. I mean, you might be able in a situation where you've got an outer loop or some big transportation infrastructure that you know is coming. That might allow you to plan a little bit further in advance. Mm-hmm. Remember, the good news for most all these people, they don't. If LP&L is a problem, they don't have to worry about it because they're all South Plains Electric Co-op where they
That's
are,
true.
and
yeah.
So if that's not something they have to worry about. But part of my family came to Texas with Stephen F. Austin. The other part moved to stay ahead of civilization, and they moved about every 2 or 3 years. And some part, I think they maybe were trying to stay ahead of the law too. But regardless, it's sort of been our American heritage that some of us don't want to live in the city. And I think that's great. But I think what we have to realize is that may require that you have to move again to stay out of an incorporated area.
Visiting with Dan Pope, candidate for mayor. Dan, tell folks where they can find more information about you online.
DanPopeForMayor.com, Facebook at Dan Pope for Mayor. We're excited. If you want us to come out to your home or business, let us know. I'll be glad to come by and see or call you on the phone if you'd like to do that. I'd like to talk issues with anybody that wants to do it. Most importantly, Chad, I want to sort of start where we started. That's about getting people to vote. Please get out and vote. We'd love to have your vote. I'd love to earn your vote, but I want you to vote regardless. It's very important that we be part of the process.
All right. Dan Pope, candidate for mayor. Appreciate your time today.
Thanks a lot, Chad. Appreciate you guys.